When I was 6 years old, my family went camping on the beach in the effort to teach us kids what it meant to be Native Hawaiian. We would gather in tide pools, we'd cut fish, we learned how to cook them and played games. And in the evening, our uncle, a very loving and kind man named Mr. Kanoa, would tell us stories about our ancestors. So one night, he gathered us together in a circle, and he told us about these great navigators who sailed on these little canoes across the world's largest ocean, using the stars and the sun and the moon to guide them to find tiny little islands scattered across this great expanse. The stories were awesome, and we were hooked. But Mr. Kanoa could see in our eyes that he could have been talking about the Trojans or the Vikings, because to us, there was really no difference. Those people that he was talking about in those stories seemed kind of distant, sort of abstract, to belong to us, to me. So he asked us, everybody stand up. So we did. He said, each one of you are descended from somebody like that in one of those stories. And lined up behind each one of us are members of our entire family who came before. That if we ever fall, they'll be right there to catch you. And if you're lucky, really lucky, and you walk slowly, ever so slowly, and then quickly look back, you just might see one of them out of the corner of your eye. Try it. Okay, so we started walking kind of awkwardly, slowly, ever so slowly, and we quickly turned back in anticipation. Did you see them? Yeah. Well, what did they look like? Ooh, mine was 7 feet tall with big muscles, said one of the show-off boys. My best friend, she said hers had beautiful skin with long black hair. I didn't say anything, but I was sure that I saw my great-great-grandmother in a tent of a dress, her silver hair pulled back, looking at me with a stern but approving look. Looking into her eyes, it was like looking into my own in the mirror. At that moment, for the rest of my life, I knew that my ancestors were real, that everywhere I went, no matter how much trouble I was in, no matter how lonely I felt, they would be right there with me to help. But why am I talking about ancestors? Because we all have them. And whether we're aware of it or not, they have the power to affect profoundly our lives. Our ancestors, we are of them, and they are in us. Most of us recognize that, right? In our physical traits, kind of family resemblances, like I have my mother's eyes, or maybe in mannerisms. I'm not sure where I get that from. But scientists are discovering through a new field called behavioral epigenetics that not only do we get these physical traits passed down, but the experiences and actions of our ancestors get passed to us as memory through tiny little switches in our DNA. So in other words, our experiences, they get stored in our genes. They become part of us. And then we pass them down to our offspring. So for example, victims of trauma, poverty, war, childhood abuse, they carry around that trauma not just as memories, but in molecular scars. So that handsome chin of yours, that chiseled one from your grandfather, may not be the only thing you inherited from him. You may have also inherited his predisposition to depression based on something he suffered. But the good news is, not only do kind of our deficits and our weaknesses get passed down, but so do our strengths and our resiliences. We inherit loving behavior. We inherit kindness. We inherit positive outlooks. So that eternal optimism that you have, that ability to overcome, to persevere, likely came from somebody in your family line who overcame something and then passed those awesome traits onto you. So I started thinking, what kind of ancestor do I want to be? What kind of negative things am I carrying around, some traits or things that I'm creating that I don't want to pass on? Conversely, what are those positive things, those awesome traits, or those things I have yet to create that I want to make sure that I do. Some of those people, those survivors, they did that. They made choices to profoundly change the future of their families by kind of overriding those junk and creating new memories to create a new path. And we can do that too. But it gets better, much more interesting. So not only do we pass all this stuff down through our DNA, but our ancestors can actually also help us perform better. A study recently by the European Journal of Social Psychology showed that simply thinking about our genetic origin helps us perform better. So I thought about that, and I thought, in these studies, these people did puzzles, or they ran obstacle courses, and just being triggered to think about their ancestor, they did better. And that's happened to me. So earlier in my career, I was a diver. I used to go on these small little inflatable boats to remote islands in the Pacific and study coral reefs. And on my very first trip, I was terrified. 1,200 miles away from safety, and I knew that in every place we were going to explore, we were probably going to encounter sharks. But I came from ocean people. Remember those guys in those tiny canoes that sailed across that huge ocean? Yeah, when I thought about that and I remembered that, my fear went away. And I don't mean to sound dramatic, because I know that kind of does, but really, it was incredible even to me how I could do things that I had never done before, simply by drawing on their courage and their ancient wisdom of the sea. Thinking about them gave me the confidence to perform better, and then kind of drawing from their memory and their experience, I figured out how. That's pretty powerful. So we all have relatively complex brains, right? So imagine what ancestral wisdom like that is stored up in you from the thousands of years since your ancestors were born. Talk about big data. Imagine if we could tap into that ancestral data bank to help us make better choices now, to help us perform better. We only get one chance at this thing called life, right? So all of those choices and the way we perform, that tells us what we're going to leave for the future. So now that we know that even if we don't know who those ancestors are, we carry their wisdom and their strength with us, what kind of ancestors do we together want to be to leave society better? So we start off as descendants of our ancestors in life, but at some point, either directly or indirectly, we end up as ancestors of our descendants. Our choices, our decisions are going to affect what happens in future generations. This idea kind of came home to me on the birth of my first son, Kamana'o. When he was born, my journey to become an ancestor had begun. It had become my legacy to think about his. So when I think about looking back now, I don't just look back for me. I have to look back and ask how to help me to help him. A couple weeks ago, my middle son, Wilhelm, was playing on the courtyard right here on campus, and he was kind of looking back and talking to someone. So I thought he was playing ninjas or pirates, one of the imaginary places he loves to go. And I said, "Hey, who are you this time?" He said, "No one, Mama," as he looked at his shoes. I was just having a hard day, so I turned around to see who was there to help. I don't even remember telling my son that story. In fact, I'm not even sure I ever did. But I can't tell you how much peace it gives me as a mother to know that even when I'm not there to protect my son, to give him guidance, that he knows his ancestors are real, and that if he ever needs them, he just has to turn around. Ancestors, we all have them. I encourage you to tap into your ancestral bank, to honor those who came before, to think about how to do awesome now, and to leave a super great future for those to follow. Ask yourself, what kind of ancestor do you want to be? Thank you very much.